Welcome to the Contented Couples channel. I'm Annie Power, a couple counsellor in London, UK. And I've done extensive research into what makes couples contented. And on this channel, I speak to colleagues about attachment, love, and what builds a lasting bond. And today I'm very happy to be speaking to my long-term friend and colleague, Linda Cundy.
Hello, Annie.
And the question we're going to look at today is how attachment works in mate selection. So how do we choose a partner and how does attachment work? And also, can therapy help with that? We're thinking particularly about individual therapy. Can it help someone get ready for choosing a partner and choose the right person? I think that is a kind of presenting problem that a lot of individuals bring to therapy, Linda.
Certainly in my practice, I would say a considerable proportion of clients over many years are people who've had difficulties in their intimate relationships, who perhaps have a history of broken relationships, of disappointment, or being in current relationships that are unsatisfying to them. And a few kind of early on starting out in looking for somebody, and especially it seems to me in the younger generation who are using perhaps internet dating sites and so on, feeling quite a lot of disappointment and frustration at the whole experience of finding someone to be with.
That one about people's exhaustion with internet dating site, well, apps mostly now. And I think as a therapist, it can be a challenge to keep the focus on where it needs to be, which is how do we help someone really develop more secure attachment? Then they're going to be able to handle the apps and find the right person. Whereas I know I can get slightly drawn into the whole process of apps and websites.
Indeed, and of course you and I wrote a chapter together, didn't we, about the impact of the internet on dating and making relationships. But yes, the technicalities are really neither here nor there. The issue is about readiness, being emotionally ready for a relationship and then finding someone suitable.
But what would you say does make someone emotionally ready?
Well, if there is a history of relationships perhaps not working out, then from an attachment perspective, we need to help our clients to understand what drew them into those relationships in the first place. What were they looking for? How realistic might that have been? To see if there are any patterns in relationships, past relationships, that turned out to be unhelpful, and what that might help them understand about themselves and their own attachment histories. And as I said in the previous conversation about adaptation, who did most of the adapting? Let's be honest here. Who accommodated most in this relationship, and was that a problem? Is that something you're going to be trying to avoid in future relationships?
So in terms of what makes someone ready for a relationship, thinking there of that work of learning from the past, recognizing patterns, acknowledging one's own behavior, that really fits with what came up in my research with couples. That I was impressed that the contented couples I met were able to say that perhaps in previous relationships, they hadn't been as good a partner as they'd like to be. They weren't saying, these were all rubbish people I was with. They were saying, I needed to grow up. I needed to change. And that's such a good recipe for getting ready, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And before I go on and talk more about therapy and the qualities that help somebody make a satisfying choice, I suppose I've been talking about people with a history of failed relationships, but I'm aware that you've also been doing some research into couples who've had an arranged introduction. So this might almost for them be their first relationship. And that's not something I'm terribly familiar with.
Well, that was really important to me, that in looking at contented couples, I wanted to look across the board at different types of relationship and ways people form them. And so my sample of 18 in the book, but I did interview some others too, included several from arranged marriages. And those were all very varied. They were all arranged, not forced. I'm not interested in forced marriages, but very varied, from the ones where the more traditional format, where the parents do the choosing and they present some options to the young adults who say, well, I like that one, or I don't like the look of that one, to a more you call it a more modernized version or a hybrid version, where the children actually choose the person they're interested in and present them to the parents. Mm-hmm. But it's still an arranged marriage because the choice is made with the family in mind and very much with the parents' blessing.
Yeah.
Of course, lots of Western people also have their families in mind, and they want to choose a partner who their friends and family like. So I found much more continuity than I expected, but there still is, I think, a dividing line in terms of a more collectivist culture, where you're not just thinking about yourself as a automaton, you're thinking about the group and what will work for the group.
Yeah.
But what I was fascinated into how the process of choice worked in the arranged marriages, particularly where the young people had an initial very brief meeting, after which they were required to say, yes, I'd like to take it forward, or no, I wouldn't. Because I'm thinking, and I guess you would as well, here we've got two young people, they've had some pre-information, so there's been an opportunity for fantasy and imagination. And then they have the families have maybe a tea party, which might, let's say it lasts an hour. And then there's 15 minutes where the two young people are actually in a room alone. And after that, they're making some kind of a decision. It's not the absolute final one, but it's a fairly serious decision. Mm-hmm. And then usually the engagement would follow soon after. But that first decision is pretty serious. And I'm thinking, how are people making that decision? Now, they're asking very sensible questions. And this is one of the strengths of the arranged system, that people are saying, well, this is what I want. This is what I want in my career, where I want to live, what I want with children. The families have already exchanged basic information about income and health and important items. But I'm guessing that a lot still is happening unconsciously in the 15 minutes. There's still a sense of, how does my attachment strategy fit with this person's attachment strategy?
Yes. So the values, there are explicit conversations about values. But as you say, and I said earlier about how sensitive we are at picking up all the non-verbal, subliminal cues. And of course, when things work well, I guess, love comes later, doesn't it?
That's exactly it.
Yes.
That's those are the contrasts. That the romantics, they fall in love with a great blast, and they start at the top of a mountain. But
yes.
We know where they're going next. And almost all romantic couples have to go through disillusionment before they begin to build something steady.
Yes.
And the arranged marriages are starting quite low on the mountain. And they build, and certainly in my sample, one couple, it was particularly clear, a very traditionally arranged marriage, and they fell very much passionately in love after the marriage.
It's a lovely story, yes.
But if we're thinking about how therapy helps people with choice, and you said qualities which help someone with making that choice, and how can therapy help us grow those qualities?
Well, from my perspective, therapy is about helping our clients who would almost always have an insecure pattern of attachment, an insecure attachment history, become more secure. So the question is, what are the qualities of secure attachment that therapy hopes to help people develop? And one of them is the capacity to manage feelings. So we might say that someone who's very uncomfortable with their feelings, very shut down, you know, becoming more spontaneous, taking the risk to open up a little bit, to allow their anger, as well as, you know, perhaps their warmer, more passionate feelings, those can be encouraged, they warm up a little bit. And there are other individuals who get flooded with their feelings and have no space to stand back and think. So therapy, I hope, will help them to, I mean, certainly not to become a cold fish, but to, rather than make spontaneous and sometimes quite disastrous decisions in a highly agitated state, to allow some time to calm down, to think, to reflect, to look at the bigger picture. So managing feelings is a big part of being secure. Another is being able to see others as people in their own right. So rather than imagine that your partner or potential partner, everything about them is to do with you, that they're if they seem a little remote or if they seem angry, if you assume it's all about you, actually to see that they have their own history and a life of their own outside the relationship that has an impact on them. And they do have their own fantasies and values. So they're not just playing a kind of role in your life story, but you're playing a role in theirs as well. So being able to empathize with others as well, and empathize with a potential partner would be a huge part of the therapeutic work. But perhaps one of the most important things is helping people grieve for past relationships that haven't worked out. This is romantic relationships, but also for things that were missing in their own early lives. To feel some compassion for themselves about perhaps the circumstances they had to grow up in that may not have been ideal. And if they can really acknowledge that this wasn't perfect, this did make their lives very difficult, they missed out on all kinds of things because of it, but equally their parents were people with their own difficulties. So it's not about blaming the parents, but about seeing the bigger picture. And we know with grieving for a bereavement that normally, you know, that's a very painful process, but it eventually comes to an end. And when it comes to an end, you become free to reinvent yourself, if you like, to take more risks, to start again. So this process of grieving for losses and things that have been absent helps somebody be prepared for a new relationship.
That's such a useful list. I'm just glancing. So the first one was capacity to manage feelings. That's really clear. For the avoidant person, that means being a bit more comfortable with their own feelings, whether vulnerable or aggressive, so that they can be closer. For the preoccupied person, it means learning to manage and contain.
And trust a little, yes.
So that they can rely on themselves, not to be over impulsive or desperate.
Yes.
And then being able to see others in their own right. And I guess this is in the area of having implicit boundaries, being comfortable with the sense of oneself as a separate being, and being able to empathize. And that, I guess that really links very much to your fourth one about grief, because in order to be able to empathize with others, we need the self-compassion first, perhaps. Yes. So just to wind up, in terms of those, really help us think about what makes someone ready. And there's ready, because there's ready for choosing the right person, and there's ready for being chosen, isn't there?
Oh, that's such a lovely concept, yes, to be ready in oneself to take, well, but to take the risk or start on the adventure, however you want to see it, but also perhaps not to be so so influenced by the shadows and the ghosts from the past in terms of looking for a new partner, to approach it with fresh eyes and perhaps be more psychologically aware and more aware of what's going on inside yourself as well.
So that's really made sense to me, of your point about doing the grief first. The value of that is that ghosts from the past no longer have such a hold on us.
Yes, yes.
So we've talked about relationship ready, and I think we're going to call the video How to Choose a Partner, which is a little bit ambitious as a title. But I think the reason why neither of us is saying now you go out and choose a partner by doing ABC, what we're saying is, when we can get ourselves to a place of sort of good enough earned security, secure attachment, the choosing will look after itself.
Yes, yes. But of course, ongoing therapy can help those early stages of a relationship. I know that's something that we'll talk about separately.
That's lovely. But the but, you were restraining from the but the but sounds really important. If we're ready for a relationship, we'll be much better equipped for our antennae will lead us much more reliably to a kind of suitable person. Of course, there'll still be dilemmas. But then when someone's come to a good enough place with their own friends and family, they'll be also in a good place to talk to friends and family about important decisions.
Yes, yes, to use the resources, both the external resources in terms of friends and family and others, and therapists. And, you know, information online and all the kinds of
yes,
resources people have, but also their internal resources. You know, their sense of a kind of hunger for connection with another person, not just for romance and for passion, but, you know, to be loved as well, and to give love and to make a life with someone else.
I think that idea about using resources, internal and external, really sort of does tie up the two things, the ready for relationship and how to choose. Because if we have that comfort with the self, that secure attachment, we have a sense of not only who to trust in the external world, but almost which parts of the self to trust.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps with any decision. But we'll say goodbye now. And in a further video, we're going to look at, having made the selection and started on a relationship, how to help that be a long-term bond. So thank you, Linda, very much.
My pleasure, Annie.